Hi everybody, my name is Anna. I've been member of Students for Liberty for many years, I think since 2014. And the reason I'm here is because I received the honor to introduce to you Dr. Tom Palmer, which was a prominent figure for me, inspired me through the years, and influenced on so many students around the world as a part of activity in Students for Liberty. His book, his lecture, and I remember the first lecture in Prague. I was so inspired me, and that's been shaped my ideological perspective, the way I believe, the way I see the world. It had a very, very big influence on me and on so many students around the world. So I'm really honored to introduce Dr. Tom Palmer. Dr. Tom Palmer is Executive Vice President for International Programs at Atlas Network, where he holds the George M. Yeager Chair for Advancing Liberty. He is co-author with Matt Warner of Development with Dignity, Self-Determination, Localization, and the End of Poverty. He is also a senior fellow of the Cato Institute. Palmer received his BA in liberal arts from St. John College in Annapolis, Maryland. His master in philosophy from the Catholic University of America, Washington, D.C., and his doctorate in politics from Oxford University. This is a short brief, but he made so many significant things, and I'm really, really honored to introduce Dr. Palmer, please.
Thank you very, very much, Anna. And if I've got my PowerPoint slide up here, can we do get that running, please?
The white dot.
The white dot.
This is the clicker.
Okay, nothing is happening. The other white one, all right? There's only one white one. Well, in the meantime, I can mention one thing. I'm so happy to be in Israel. I have so many Israeli friends, and they told me how wonderful it is. The food is fantastic. But one thing disappointed me a little bit, I have to be honest. And that is, they said, you know, Tom, conversations, intellectual conversations in Israel are usually intense. That's not true. All of mine have been outdoors or in buildings. Not one has been intense. But let's see, how are we doing on the PowerPoint here? My friends tell me, don't quit your day job. Is it loading up? All right.
We got a problem with the PowerPoint. Do you have your thumb?
Well, I have my laptop here. Shall we load that up?
We can connect the laptop.
Can you do that? All right.
Okay, we'll solve this technical problem. I apologize. There was some misunderstanding, and we'll try to do it now. Okay.
All right. In the meantime, I'm going to fill up the dead space with my Borscht Belt routine. I would like to mention one thing about Students for Liberty, and that is I speak to Students for Liberty groups all around the world. So in Vietnam, in Brazil, I spoke to a big audience there. They get about 900 people coming to their programs in Argentina, in Mexico, in the US, in Prague. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we're going to pull this up. Quatsch. There we go. Okay, so my theme today is about the globalization of the ideas of liberty, the ideas that you share that are in fact found all around the world. But first, let's think for a moment about what it means to be a free person. What does it mean to enjoy liberty? When I was very young, people used to talk about the rule of law, and it seemed naive to me. But I learned from experience of countries without law that John Locke got it exactly right. That he pointed out, where there is no law, there is no freedom. Law and freedom are intimately connected. And people see a distinction only when they misunderstand law to mean not rules, but commands or edicts. And those should be distinguished from law. Law is about rules that are applicable to all of us. And within the context of an equal rule of law, we can enjoy equal liberty. That is really the key, to follow your own path, to chart your own life within the context of a legal order that offers equality for all and equal status. Now, the ethical foundations for this, which I know have already been discussed at this conference, were also laid out many years ago. And they're pretty simple. Confucius, when he was asked by a disciple, is there one expression that can be acted upon until the end of one's days? He replies, there is shu. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not want. It's a basic principle that everyone, I think, can understand. It's also been articulated in ancient Babylonia by Hillel the Elder. When asked, can you teach me Judaism and the law while I'm standing on one foot? In other words, in a hurry. That which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That is the entire Torah. I was hesitant about commenting on this in Israel because of my own lack of knowledge of Torah, but I'm just quoting a learned person. And to the rest is interpretation. Go and study. So how does liberty fare around the world? How's it been going? Well, with the collapse of collectivist regimes, two major waves, there were huge increases in the enjoyment of liberty. Till 1945, the defeat of fascism and National Socialism meant a massive increase in liberty for the survivors of those horrors. And then 1989 to 1991, big increases in the numbers of people who enjoyed liberty. And following on that, also in Latin America, decline in military dictatorships as well. Unfortunately, there's been a bit of a global backsliding, especially regarding political liberties. So if you look at the work of Freedom House, which tracks these things, the ups and downs, more countries have been experiencing a decline in the liberty enjoyed by the people than have been experiencing an increase. In addition, looking at the Human Freedom Index of the Cato Institute, which measures a huge number of variables, mainly focused on state coercion, but not exclusively, such as incidents of sexual violence in the society, incidents of terrorism and violence generally. These are also, obviously, infringements on liberty. And there the message also isn't particularly good. We see about 17% of the world population increased in freedom, 83%, think about how gigantic China is, an outsized participant, has seen a decline. So this has not been a good decade and a half, roughly. Now, Israel has seen increased liberty since 2009, but it's still 62nd in this ranking. And I should point out, you can go online and download all of this and see all the elements that go into it and make up your own mind about how accurate these things are. It's my experience, in every country I go to, people say, things are worse here than you understand. And that's normal because we focus on the things that concern us and worry us. But this is an attempt to compare across all the nations for which there are comparable data. Now, think about the liberty movement and how it is available on every continent. This is one of the most exciting things of my lifetime, to see the growth of the ideas of liberty everywhere. Now, there are obvious horrifying outliers. You can think about North Korea, think about Tehran, think about Cambridge, Massachusetts, and so on. But overall, we've seen the penetration of these ideas virtually everywhere. And I should also point out in Iran as well, although obviously our friends have to be extremely careful. A dear friend of mine who we recently got out of Iran, his last visit, I accompanied him on his cell phone to the last visit to the prosecutor, and they broke his fingers in the interrogation, and I told him next time they won't be gentle. So we were able to get him out with the help of our Spanish libertarian friends, get him to Spain, and after a very long delay, now in the United States, and he's at University of Pittsburgh. So the group I work with, Atlas Network, we have 523 partner organizations in 103 countries. It started with 16, so the rate of growth is not too bad. We continue to grow, and these are real organizations, not paper. We do delete every year groups that cease to be active. It's like any business, some go out of business. But we have 523 active groups. And increasingly, the focus is not just on education and talking about liberty. Not that that's a bad thing. It's a very good thing. But taking steps to increase the experience of human liberty by reducing coercion. And that's the point, ultimately, of the ideas of liberty. To increase the experience. We differ from the collectivists in a very deep way. Collectivists want to seize power so they can tell everyone else how to live. So their vision of the perfect society can be imposed on all the rest of us. And we don't. We're happy when other people get to enjoy more freedom. We don't have this view that we have to take over the state. If the state can be reduced in its scope and power, and more people enjoy liberty, that's a good thing, especially when the PowerPoint works. There we go. So I want to run through very quickly some case studies, just a handful, from different continents to see what people are doing to advance liberty. So, are we working again here? There we go, thank you. Looking at Africa, just taking one of our partners in Burundi. It's a fantastic organization established by Aimable Manirakiza. And they went out and talked to cross-border traders. If you've been to much of sub-Saharan Africa, most trade is carried out by women. It's a female activity. And the women who do the cross-border trade have a very hard time of it. You had to have a passport to enter and exit. It means it's stamped, once for exiting and once for entering, to come back the same day. Every month and a half, you need a new passport. You have to go to Bujumbura. It's very expensive. And remember, a country with about $350 per year annual income. You have to have certificates of origin that show that the chickens that laid these eggs you're exporting were Burundian chickens. Proud Burundian chickens. You have to have the paperwork and the stamps to prove it. And similarly for the things coming back in. If you don't have them, the financial police visit you, they steal your products, and they rape you. And our friends, when I first talked to them on the phone, they said, il y a un problème avec la violence sexuelle. There's a problem with sexual violence. And that sounds so anodyne. Okay, that sounds bad. Gang rape. Brutal gang rape. Because women have to go at night. They don't have the passport. They're extorted. They're assaulted by soldiers, police, and criminal gangs. They went and worked with these people. They were able to eliminate the need for a passport. You have a border crossing card, no stamp, in, out. So you can go during the day, not at night when you get raped. They eliminated most of the paperwork and liberated the trade for women in that country. So this was a tremendous success in the experience of liberty, not being subjected to rape, violence, theft, and extortion when you engage in the simple act of trading. We can look then also in Asia. Oh, thank you. From 1936, Farmers were subjected to rural agricultural patents. It's like a property right, but not. You get to farm on it, but you can't sell it, you can't improve it, you cannot connect it to another farm and increase the size of your holdings. If you do sell it to someone else, to protect your rights, you get to claim it back again after they buy it. So who's going to buy that from somebody? They can't realize the capital value of their asset. And in addition, it can't be owned by a corporation, which we all know are evil, but that means you can't get a mortgage, you can't get a loan, because it cannot be collateral for a bank. And there, the Foundation for Economic Freedom was able to liberate 2.5 million farming families by passing a simple law. That's the whole law right there. I love short laws like this. And here's the key. It says that all restrictions imposed regarding acquisitions, encumbrances, conveyances, transfers, or dispositions are eliminated. Full and complete property for Philippine farmers. And this has had a huge impact on the ability of poor people to escape poverty through freedom. In Brazil, thanks, by the way, largely to Students for Liberty, which have played a big role in this. They've been there long enough, their graduates are now at the sub-ministerial level in government. They passed the economic freedom law. There's a presumption of freedom. You don't have to ask permission. There is a presumption you are engaging in good faith rather than guilty and forced to prove yourself innocent in front of the state. And there is a recognition that the individual, compared to the state, has little power, and therefore the state must be restrained. Big conference I was at in Sao Paulo focused a great deal on implementation of this law in over 5,000 municipalities. But when they get that done, this will liberate hundreds of millions of people from the stultifying Brazilian bureaucracy. North America, here much of the activity in both the US and Canada is on the state and provincial level. And there has been tremendous success in reducing police violence in the form of qualified immunity. Many people don't know. If the police attack you, they violate your rights, and even if they knowingly violate your enumerated rights, they are completely immune. It's monstrous being subjected to that kind of violence, and now more states are eliminating that. In addition, the increase over the past 60 years in licensed professions, from about 2.5% now to 28% of jobs in the US require a license. If you want to shampoo hair, you have to have a hair shampooing license. So all of you who washed your hair this morning are potential criminals. If you paid your spouse to wash your hair and your spouse paid you, both of you are engaged in crimes in a number of American states. And the state level think tanks have been eliminating these. And very importantly, since the US has such a huge criminalized population, thanks to the war on drugs, second to China in the percentage of the population that's incarcerated, nothing to be proud of. So I explained to my fellow American citizens, being number one is not a good thing in this category, or even number two. But once you've been incarcerated, you can't get a license for any of these licensed professions. How are you going to earn a living and return to the community? And they've been eliminating these qualifications unless it's related to the profession, like you engage in massive fraud and you want to be an accountant. Aside from that, or sexual violence and you want to be a daycare teacher or something like that. Aside from that, get rid of it. Let people work and return to the community. So there's been tremendous progress on that front. We'll turn to Europe now. And since the elimination of the Soviet Union, what happened with the kolkhoz system, the collective farms, they did try, at least in Ukraine, didn't work so well in Russia, to break them up and return assets to people, land or equipment. So some effort was made to do that correctly. But then, immediately thereafter, they imposed a moratorium. They said, oh my God, Ukrainian people are so stupid, they don't know how to buy and sell stuff. And so we'll have a 1-year moratorium that you can't sell it. You got the property from the kolkhoz, but you can't sell it. And surprisingly, well, maybe not, every year the 1-year moratorium was added for another year. What did that mean? It meant an entire generation of people died without being able to sell their property and retire on the asset. It meant that their kids, who maybe want to live in the city and be, who knows what, tattoo artists or something, still have to own that farmland, even if they're not good at farming. So, what do? The best they can do is rent it out to major oligarch-owned agribusinesses that rent it for a pittance, almost nothing. Our partners there worked together. They went to court. They mobilized public opinion. And finally, 2020, the Rada, the parliament, lifted this temporary moratorium on sales and liberated more than 6 million Ukrainian farm owners to do what they want with their land. And now that turns me then to Ukraine generally, because Ukraine is experiencing much greater and far more deadly threats, as we see every day in the news. I should point out, though, that this war did not start on February 24. It started in 2014, when Russia, the Kremlin, invaded and annexed territory and began ethnic cleansing programs, de-Ukrainization, forbidding the use of Ukrainian language, and so on, and the effective dismemberment of the country. Right now, the special military operation is an example of extraordinarily brutal collectivism, what we are witnessing today. And it's not like we should have been that surprised. Anyone who's been listening to the Kremlin heard this coming. Putin, last year, on July 12th, in a long, rambling essay, The Historical Unity of the Ukrainian and Russian Peoples, as he points out, we are one people. The point is, it doesn't matter what Ukrainians think. We are one people. And we will have one people and one state and one leader, which may sound familiar. It's a slogan that was heard in that region some time before. And that population, of course, is full of enemy elements who have to be purified and purged. So the Russian information agency, Novosti, had a piece recently laying out what they have in mind. The title was quite interesting. What should Russia do with Ukraine? It's like saying, what should France do with Germany? Right? Maybe leave them alone, would be possible. But what should Russia do with Ukraine? And you've heard the claim that Ukraine is a Nazi state. President Zelensky, famous Nazi, Jewish Nazi, if you will. But that's the claim. We're wiping out Nazis in Ukraine. What does it mean for the Kremlin to be a Nazi? Because we have some understanding from history what it meant to be a Nazi. Well, this is what it means. Desiring to be independent from Russia. That is a defining characteristic of a Nazi. As it points out, the current Nazified Ukraine disguises Nazism as the aspiration to independence. Talk about clever Nazis. They disguise their Nazism by saying, we just want to be free. And that is a sufficient criterion. Although there's no Nazi party, in fact, the extreme far-right racist parties got 2.15% of the vote, not enough to qualify for a single parliamentary seat in the last election, unlike in a number of European parliaments where far-right nationalist and anti-Semitic parties actually have representation. In fact, as it points out, Ukro-Nazism, interesting term, poses a bigger threat to the world and Russia than the Hitler version of German Nazism. It's really quite breathtaking claim that the desire merely to be independent is a bigger threat to the world than the Third Reich's aggression and murder. And in fact, it then calls for the Ukrainian population, which it says is primarily made of, quote, passive Nazis. Passive because they accept independence. They must be purified. And the language was pretty clear. And this is what is actually happening. They are being subjected to a genocide. The filtration camps in which they weed people out who then disappear, as well as the overall ethnic cleansing. So we've seen what this means. I don't want to pause long on these pictures. That's what it means. One soldier I talked to had been in Irpin. I spent about 7.5 weeks in Ukraine. It was horrific. He said that when they went in, when the Russian troops withdrew, they found cellars full of bodies, stacked up like firewood. They found women shaken from the rapes they had endured. They stole everything, wedding rings, television sets, computers, Game Boys, washing machines. 78,000 tons of loot has been documented so far, exported in military vehicles from Ukraine. Then they tortured and executed, and as the soldiers said, at the end, they executed their pets to indicate, we extinguish you. You are to be completely annihilated. Now, liberals, libertarians, if you will, from all over the world, have been working with our Ukrainian friends. And there's a very robust civil society in Ukraine. One way in which Ukraine and Russia diverged, under the Russian system with Putin, he has snuffed out independent businesses, independent civil society organizations, independent clubs are eliminated. And everything is dominated by the Kremlin and the Siloviki, the powerful guys, and the cronies. But Ukraine has a very robust civil society, horizontally organized amongst themselves, of people who help each other. And they've turned to our friends all across the world, primarily Europe, who donated all sorts of equipment, money, goods, and so on. That's me making body armor. I now have a degree in body armor manufacturing. This is one of the cars I bought and used to drive goods in with the unique identification on the back. Body armor for ambulance drivers. They kill ambulance drivers when they can and steal the ambulances. All kinds of medical goods that we brought in. Material for rescue squads. There I am with Natalia Melnik when I drove in a truck full of shovels. Not something I would have usually thought would be on my resume, but delivering shovels. Satellite phones, armored ambulances, 6 of which we bought in England, and Students for Liberty, I should point out. Very proud of them because they have produced huge numbers of drivers bringing these things into the horrifying zones. Let me then end with what I see as the credo of liberty. One of my heroes was a Brazilian abolitionist, Joaquim Nabuco, spent his life working to end slavery in his country, the last country to eliminate slavery in the Western Hemisphere. And in his book on abolitionism, he exhorted us, educate yourselves and educate your children in the love for the freedom of other people. That's Hillel's message, to care about other people and how we treat them. Because when you do that, you will truly appreciate your own freedom, only when you also love the freedom of others. So the last point here from the Decembrist uprising 1831, when the Poles and the Russians, they rose up and they said, we fight for our freedom and yours. And that, I think, is the message of the global liberty movement. Thank you very much.